in the dark, keep the light on, and it's Banned Book Week, all week, from September 22nd through the 28th. So our topic, as I said, is historical voices, or also known as banned voices throughout history. Our first guest is Andre R. Frattino, author of Simon Says. Andre is a professional illustrator and storyteller who's worked in various mediums, including graphic novels. He is the creator of the Florida-focused graphic novel series, The Flagler's View, and has worked with many New York Times best-selling authors and illustrators. His title that we will be talking about today, Simon Says, started as a Kickstarter, which became a huge hit. And Simon Says is now on the market today. And I've read it, and you should definitely pick that up. Our second guest is Sanford Green. He is the artist of Bitter Root, which I read this weekend. And wow, the symbolism and the depth in which Sanford gets into in his story, I really look forward to talking about in a second. So thank you, Sanford, for being here. My name is Dr. Katie Monnin. I've written a lot of books about teaching comic books and graphic novels in the classroom. And I started my own pop culture consultant company, Why So Serious Productions, just last year. So just a little bit of an overview of the history of Banned Books Week. What it is a celebration of the freedom to read and express ideas. First launched in 1982 by 3 organizations, including the American Library Association, American Booksellers Association, National Association of College Stores. So today, ALA and 13 other contributors are sponsoring and taking a part in this, and they are able to reach 2.8 billion people through mainstream media, which is a really awesome big deal. Cool. A few things that keep your eye out on for this week is Keep the Lights On campaign. It's the Dear Banned Author letter writing campaign. There are webinars for the rest of the week, so I hope you can check those out. There's promotional materials in the ALA store and Banned Book Week's free downloads, which I'm going to go check out later, and Celebrating Banned Books Week Facebook group. You're welcome to join. Further research or resources we have for you is the Reporting Censorship, ALA.org. I always forget the name of that. Whatever. It's the line that hit the bottom is backwards. Sorry. And hopefully you can see that. Challenger Reporting, Banned Books Week website, ALA.org. B-Books. Intellectual Freedom Roundtable is also contributing to get today, and you can find them on the ALA site as well. They have resources and membership benefits, and the Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable, where so many of my friends live, and I say a hard shout out to all of you. I miss you all. So resources are also on the ALA site, and I think we're about ready to go. ALA Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable, the Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable of the American Library Association, is dedicated to supporting library staff in all aspects of engaging with graphic novels and comics, including collection development, programming, and advocacy. And on a personal note, I would just say all the work they do is amazing, and you should try to take part if you can. It's always phenomenal. ALA Intellectual Freedom Roundtable provides a forum for the discussion of activities, programs, and problems in intellectual freedom of libraries and librarians. And Image Comics, one of my favorite publishers. Image Comics is a comic book and graphic novel publisher founded in 1992 by a collective of best-selling artists. Image has since gone on to become one of the largest comics publishers in the United States. Image currently has 6 individuals on the board of directors, and it consists of 5 major houses. Image publishes comics and graphic novels in nearly every genre, subgenre, and style imaginable. It offers science fiction, fantasy, romance, horror, crime fiction, historical fiction, humor, and more. And I can vouch for that. They absolutely do. In their comics and graphic novels are absolutely amazing. Okay, so here's what we're discussing today. First, we're going to start talking about censorship as a mode of suppression, either in the present day or historically, or maybe even we may lead our thoughts into the future. Erasure of dissenting voices from the historical narrative. I'm very interested in that and maybe how it connects to current events, and the legacy of such erasure in our world today. So those will be our 3 topics, and I will go out of share mode so I can see everybody. And I can't. Okay.
You're good, Katie.
Oh. Where's the, do you see me on the screen?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. All right. So some of my first questions are really just kind of getting into the movement of what we're talking about today. Even my students this week were all asking, what's a banned book? And I thought, how could you not know what a banned book is? So it's really fortunate we're doing this talk today. So for Sanford and for Andre, how do you feel about Simon Says and Bitterroot being a focal point for historical voices during our time and climate? And why do you think both were why did you choose both topics specifically?
I'll let Sanford go first. So.
Oh, well, to be honest with you, it was a part of a healing process, I think, for me and a few of my my colleagues in the industry. I mean, let's just be honest. What we've been seeing within the last 5-6 years within the social climate, political climate has been very polarizing and disheartening and enraging, but it's also made it very engaging. However, unsettling it may be at a lot of times, we found ourselves finally bringing a lot of things to light that has been there, that we've known for ages, especially within my community, within the Black community, and just in general, people of color. We faced a lot of challenges and obstacles. The systemic design that has permeated throughout this country and in history in general. So long story short, the end results of the elections really just made us feel like, well, here it is. It's finally come to full fruition within this generation. I mean, I think we see some type of zeitgeist that raises this racial tension every 30, 40 years or whatever throughout time, especially in this country. So we felt like, now is the time. And on the flip side of that, though, we felt empowered because there have been prior or leading up to that moment, there's been a lot of voices and creative voices, especially, they were starting to emerge. And then the comic industry, as you know, throughout history, the comic industry has been a kind of a pulse of pop culture in general. Captain America was created because of what was going on in society, politically, socially. So we knew that we were in a unique place. Part of the creative team, we were at Marvel at the time, and Marvel was doing really well with Black Panther and Luke Cage, and we saw that there definitely a huge enthusiasm for unique voices, within that realm. And we were also a bit alarmed that there weren't any other creations outside of that. There were a few, but on that level, there weren't a whole lot, especially in the creator-owned realm. So we saw the need to take that leap, if you will, and go into the creator-owned realm and create something that's new and something that hopefully could land in the same space as a Black Panther or Miles Morales or what have you. So, but at the same time, be in this independent creator-owned realm, which is there's not a whole lot of creator-owned properties that's being mentioned in a lot of those spaces. So we knew that if we didn't do it at that point in time, it probably, because the window is small, the window of opportunity was small, the ship was going to keep moving forward, and if we didn't take that plunge, then we probably would have missed that window, or someone else would have seized that opportunity, and that's fine too. But we knew that we had some unique story to tell as well, and we just didn't want to miss that opportunity. So yeah, that's ultimately where our the influence of Bitterroot kind of permeated through that time period.
Yeah, absolutely true. I mean, one thing I absolutely loved about Bitterroot was, number one, it was a family, and a family that had to come together in order to respond to the conflicts in the story. And it's a bringing together and also a highlight on discrimination and how it manifests figuratively.
Right.
I think that was really well accomplished. Andre, how about you?
Well, Simon Says has been something on my mind since around 2007, shortly before I actually got to meet Sanford for the first time. I don't know if he remembers, but he attended Savannah College of Art and Design for a comic art form. I was a student there.
Really?
Some of my Sonic the Hedgehog artwork way back when. So,
cool.
It's awesome being here at this roundtable with you. But, you really gave me a lot of insight into my artwork and my projects. But Simon Says was a big...
Now I feel really old now.
No, not at all. So I was only like 6 years old. No, I'm joking.
Okay, wait, I'm feeling old now.
But, Simon Says was something that by the time I had come up with it as an idea, we were still well before even, not to get political, before the Obama years and before, the current political climate we're in now. So to me, it was more focused on historical narrative. In the climate that we are unfortunately a part of today, there is a lot of nationalism that takes place, a lot of racial prejudice. And Simon Says went from being hopefully going to be just a historical graphic novel focusing on history long gone. It has now become a very socially charged book. And I don't know if that's for the better or for the worst, but from the very beginning of our Kickstarter campaign, my publicist said, you got to be prepared for this. She had a coming to God moment with me and said, look, you've got to be prepared for everything from dotting to swatting. People might come after you with this. People might, actually try and go at you personally, your family. My artist, Jesse Lee. We were even on Stormwatch at one point in time when the Kickstarter was live. Stormwatch actually I did an alert on our book. And fortunately, thank God, nothing really bad happened. But, even today I'm watching as, Simon Says is getting publicity, even on such things as like Instagram, social media. People are going at Image with a man Image. I can't believe you're going down the whole, Antifa avenue. And it's like, what world we live in today where people are being persecuted for being anti-fascist. but it came to a realization that Simon Says was going to be more than what we had originally anticipated it to be. And it's, for somebody who's not a really confrontational person, it's meant that I'd have to take a stand one way or the other. And Jesse and I are both feeling it that way. We're going to hopefully meet with a lot of positivity and a lot of praise for our work. And we're probably going to meet with some backlash and from some not so, hospitable people. So it's a very awakening moment for us as artist and writer. And, we're just going to see where this goes.
I honestly, it was an awakening read for me as well. And that was because it's not too often that I read a World War II book or a Holocaust book or anything like that that makes me feel tremendously empowered at the end. And that's one of the things your book accomplishes through the main character is he I think personally goes around and gets justice. And I think that's one of the most powerful aspects of your title. Okay. How do you feel about censorship, specifically if it would happen to either of your titles? How might you respond?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll lead off. I don't know how I would feel about that. I think that initially I would probably chuckle at it because if it got censored, then you're doing something right because somebody has a problem with the book. Ultimately, my area of expertise and not expertise, I'm not that cocky, but my area of focus is to tell narrative historical works, history that's lesser known and lesser told. So to me, to have a graphic novel that can be an educational tool to be censored, it would be the chuckle at first, and then it would be probably a little frustration because now it's not getting in the hands and being in the eyes in front of the people who could really benefit from it the most.
Yeah, I feel similar. It would be a little perplexing to me, but at the same time, it would almost be not surprising based on the political, social landscape. Anything that's exposing or bringing something to surface, to light, that causes, actual conversation. There's this weird fear of that. A conversation is what's needed. Dialogue is what's needed. It wouldn't be surprising because it's happening in other forms, in music and in film, and but again, what we're doing is I don't really see as controversial. I mean, it is what it is. I think even the way that we tell our story, using this fantastical element to tell this really deep-seated underbelly of how social issues, with all the social issues and the ramifications of those issues, is permeated throughout history. Really, to use this fantastical element, I think, is it's almost you should be able to tell this story to really almost all ages. There's that old saying from, I think it was Mary Poppins, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down better.
Yes.
I think that's kind of, we use this thing because the medicine isn't that, it doesn't taste good,
Right.
but it's needed. In order to heal, you need it. So we kind of had that approach from the very beginning of how we could tell this really intense story and it be able to connect and not be dismissed immediately the second you read it. Truth be told, we've had every walk of life come to us at, I live in the South, And the majority of the cons and the book signings that I attend, the majority are Caucasians, and they all are just enamored with the book, which is really, it's very satisfying and liberating, because we weren't trying to just tell a story to shun one side of someone's perspective. We wanted to open the dialogue for everyone and to understand that this thing is a lot more complex. It's not, for lack of better words, it's not just black and white, right? So that's been very gratifying to know that they as well have really invested in our story.
Yeah, I absolutely enjoyed, excuse me, the kind of sci-fi moments where the characters had these abilities to fight the monsters or the racial. It was just so layered with symbology, and so much conversation, I think, in classrooms can happen around each of those characters.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I call it, this is our 7-layer cake. Just when you think, oh, it's about this, and then you read, then it's like, oh, wait a minute, there's something else there that is very poignant. And as you continue with the story, you realize that we're doing even, I think, our grand story overall, people haven't even really fully seen yet. So we're excited about where it's going.
Is that a hint that there will be more? Because that's what I was thinking when I read it.
Oh yeah, it was definitely more. I think the thing with the industry is that it's the comic industry is it's awesome. So many incredible stories, and you have Simon Says, and Pretty Deadly is coming back. If you guys are familiar with that, it's one of my favorite books in the last couple of years, and so many other titles are super diverse. On top of the fact that you got your mainstream stuff, so you got something for everyone. But on top of that, there's so much out there. It's kind of hard to, So for us, we were in a place where we knew we had an incredible story to tell, but we knew that we needed to reach the audience, because the audience, unfortunately, within the core of the industry, is not as plentiful as it used to be. But there's an audience out there. This is a whole nother discussion. I'm sorry. I'm about to go down this rabbit hole, but it's like, but that's the reason why an event or programs like what you guys are doing are so important, because you guys go beyond the core of the industry. You guys, the libraries, I've said this at some conference somewhere. I was like, the libraries are the linchpin to the rest of the world. Like, the industry is a very niche kind of, place. And it kind of, that bubble expanded, and then it burst, and then it shrunk like twice down from where it originally was. And to try to burst, to break out of that was very hard for a lot of people. And if you don't have a unique story on top of that, it's even more challenging. But here, the libraries are they have the pulse of you're the linchpin between the industry and the people, the rest of the people. And that's another reason why we knew that we have to make this story something that will be unique, that will get the attention of the libraries, which then you guys are the ambassadors to the rest of the you're the ambassadors to our industry, to the rest of the world. So we had to make sure that we were very, very intentional in how we told this story, because I know this this conference called Banned Books, but we were trying to be a book that would absolutely be inviting for, we wanted to tell the truth, but we wanted to also make it very inviting for the masses. So we appreciate everything that you guys do.
Yeah. And I'll say that, Sanford's 100% right on, how there's just about a book for everybody right now. One of the first books that I actually really read was Mouse, Art Spiegelman's Mouse, back in freshman year of high school. And I think that kind of set the groundwork for me being really into historical graphic novels. And even while I was in college, and even after college, it wasn't that easy to find graphic novels that touched on historical or social changes. Now you got it on everything. I mean, there's so much material. I was just at a bookstore yesterday. I couldn't figure out what new book I wanted. You've got March. You've got, graphic novels about the LGBTQ movements. You've got graphic novels that are set in space but deal with social commentary. You've got Sunset Back in the West, and graphic novel on Darwin. And there's so much good material out there. And when I talk to people who want to be writers and want to be artists, I tell them very almost soberingly, I know that you've got your own space cowboy story that you really, really want to tell. I was like, but figure out what in the audience is really needed right now. Find that niche that needs scratching. And where it really is right now is within social historical roots. People want to hear more nonfiction portrayed through their fiction. They want to see more real world storytelling. And of course, there's still a place for the superheroes, and there's a place for your space cowboy book, in the near future. But if you're trying to make a name for yourself, or you're trying to really elicit a response from people, it's going to be in some sort of narrative that has deep roots in people. So
yeah, I think that aligns with what Sanford was saying as well, in terms of the current events, kind of a beacon call for the needs we might have in those individual niches. To fill that need for individuals anywhere, no matter what your status is or anything like that, to feel like maybe some of this current events isn't okay, but I can find some refuge in your stories.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what else I got for you.
Can I add this in while you're looking at the question? That's exactly why I think I can speak for both of us. That's why these stories resonate too, because you want to create something that I did it ultimately as a refuge. It was my refuge to tell the story. I felt like I needed to do something, because I could have just, been tone deaf to everything. That's the very, very callous, non-informative way to go about doing things, which unfortunately a lot of people do. But I think, going back to what I said a while ago, that's why I think, as hard as it and challenging as it is overall, it has made people more engaged. Like now you're a lot more aware, you're a lot more. The reason why we're having this discussion, I really believe, is because of what has happened.
Yes.
Socially, so it's just a domino effect where it just starts to build and grow over time. So ultimately, it was my refuge. It was for my own refuge. And with that, I think I was able to tell a story that I believed in, which I can connect to it. It's going to hopefully should be able to, the viewership can sense that authenticity, that sincerity within that, which allows them to connect with it as well.
Yeah, I absolutely connected to both of your books. And in both cases, they're marginalized stories that haven't been told yet for the people who may or may not be being oppressed or feel like they are. And in both of these stories, they come into their own light and they do it right. And it's just, they're both awesome. If anybody's listening, please go buy them. And shout out to Image Comics too, right? Okay, how about this one? Have you ever what are your thoughts on censorship as a method of erasure in history or American books? Or do you feel as though you can identify any books that have kind of lost their voice due to censorship?
I don't think it's ever worked. To be honest with you, I think it's always been a failed attempt. Thank God.
Yeah.
I think that what we need to consider is if you're going to remove those outlets, you have to find other ways to be able to convey and tell that storytelling. And fortunately, comic books is something that's really attainable to almost anybody who really wants to look for it and find it. But I think that some books, like even if you think of recent novels like Harry Potter, met with a lot of censorship in certain, religious schools and universities. And, there's a lot of other books that it happens to as well. I think what we really need to worry about more so than the censorship of some of our novels is really just, forgetting roots entirely. There's some really good books out there that just don't make reprint because for whatever reason, they didn't sell a certain amount of copies. From that commercial level, you have a problem. But if you could, I'm trying to take this from a point because I've seen a book recently that I don't want to name, but I've seen a book that's lost a lot of its power simply because no one's utilizing it from a media standpoint, from a library standpoint, or anything like that. I also think culturally it's just changed and evolved, but I still think it's a powerful book. So I think that it's important that it comes across as librarians and publishers and people in the media to look for those books that are lesser known or lesser told to make sure that they don't get erased in the hustle and bustle of other publications. But as far as actual censorship and people trying to snuff it out, I think you only end up making people want to read it more. Even people in certain more closed off communities are going to get that interest. They're going to get that bug and they're going to go looking for that book one way or the other. So I think it's a failed, naive attempt.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, let's think about I immediately thought about the the Wartham trials back in this perfect example where this right here was taken to Congress, the ban comics, period. And we saw what happened with that. That just it's like this call it the Phoenix effect, if we can use geek terminology here, thinking about Phoenix from the X-Men, but it was thought to have been a success, but really the underground comics still were creating, and the mainstream found ways to work around that, and on top of that, curiosity even built more, because I think to some degree it's like you think you're doing some kind of service of justice being served or whatever when you go out and you protest against certain titles or just industry in general or whatever. And just like you said, it's like it's never worked. All it's done is it create curiosity, which then creates enthusiasm. You're never going to resolve anything by trying to oppress it, because you're going to have that resistance. I mean, it boggles my mind that's honestly, it's not just in books or whatever, it's in everything. Any type of, we're going to suppress this thing, there's going to be resistance. What makes you think throughout history has never worked, really,
Right.
Well, I take that back. It's worked seemingly on the surface, but underneath there's been this resistance. I mean, we see it even in fantasy stories like Star Wars, the Rebel Alliance. It's like the reason why they're so cool is because they still there's a remnant that is still fighting the good fight, and they're not going to just say, oh well, it's all done. we're finished here. No one, there's never going to be anything like that. So in a weird kind of way, sometimes you kind of invite that criticism or backlash or whatever you want to call that, because because you know how throughout history it's played out. So
yeah,
like you said, it's never worked and it never will.
Yeah, and one of the things I always point out to my students about Wortham in particular is that in no way, shape, or form his evidence to prove his case that comics should be banned and they hurt children wasn't accurate in any way. As someone with my doctorate, you have to have 3 points of research and data. You can't just walk into a specific space and ask that specific community one question that pretty much is prevalent throughout the country.
Right.
Yeah.
But
I think the statistic was only 1% were actually finding the comics out of the whole population at the time.
right.
Somewhat maybe intense for them. But 90% were saying, no, I read these are great and I'm learning to read.
Oh yeah. And I mean, aren't we seeing that today in the social climate where fake news,
Yeah.
false information, accusations pointing, the louder the drum or the finger pointing goes, the worse it tends to, the worse the backlash. And again, it just boggles my mind that this right here is the oldest trick in the book. Is like you don't like something for fear of change or whatever it is. A lot of it is just fear of just things being different.
I don't know if either of you ever saw it was a 1950s public service announcement that I've been trying to look for it for years and I can't find it, but it was a public service announcement from the 1950s about the dangers of comic books. And what they actually had done is it showed like a group of boys riding their bicycles down like Main Street, 1950s. They grabbed a couple of comics, they go into the woods, and it shows them reading the comics and goes, these comics are, showing the children negative, violent things. And then suddenly the kids start like grabbing rocks and sticks and banging them against the wall. And it just was trying to like push comics as just the outlet for violence, but just watching these kids act it out and then this being used as something to deter parents and schools and families from letting their kids read comics is pretty hysterical.
Very huge misconception.
Yeah.
And now
How about now this is getting pretty specific right here. So you can opt out of an answer. But I know absolutely what my answer would be, and I was wondering what yours would be. Are there any certain particular current events that really, really spurred you on to write your stories?
Oh man, I mean, what current events wouldn't have sparked Simon Says, I think.
I know, geez.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, when Simon Says first was in production with Jesse, it was 2016, 2017. So I'll let that set the stage for you with everything. It was more so almost serendipitous, everything we wrote and illustrated as it went along and how well it played out with what was going on in the social climate. I think if there's a volume 2, you'll see a lot more of that become visible and we do have plans for more than one volume of Simon Says, but we want to make sure that it does stay relevant at this point now. After everything we've seen over the past couple of years, it's really more important that Simon Says be particular to those current social, political things that are going on, because that's where it's going to have the most potency and that's where it's going to have the most benefit. So don't want to get too political, but just take everything from 2016 till now, and that's influenced everything we've been doing. So
I'm on that train.
Yeah.
How about you, Sanford?
Very similar. Possibly even prior to that. I think I mentioned earlier, just honestly, we're talking about a lot of overall negative things. I think there were a few positive things that influenced us as well. It's like, again, just starting to see the emergence of and the success of characters of color, again, being at Marvel and seeing Black Panther becoming what it is. Of course, the film and television stuff, we worked, when we were working there, Luke Cage became a pretty overnight sensation as well, with this TV show, and it just sparked a lot of interest within, and then, just within my community, just seeing so many people of color embrace it. It really kind of just empowered and gave us the enthusiasm, not the enthusiasm, but gave us the just the motivation to be able to create this thing. Then of course Miles Morales winning, is it those three? I think those three things only just cemented our, because we had those challenging things in social political climate, but then we had this other thing here that just showed that people are looking for this stuff and they want this, and it definitely it just empowered us to know that we have something that was special. It was kind of like the best of both worlds. Just a quick side note, I turned down a few major mainstream projects because I believed in what this, there's certain things that you do in your lifetime where creatively, this is it. Sometimes it takes a little longer than others to come to that place, but I knew that this was it. This right here is probably going to be the greatest thing I've ever done. And I'm not saying it in a, like, oh, I'm going to create, but in terms of meaning to it, the meaning for me, and, what it could mean moving forward, I feel like it will be the thing that really kind of, I can look back on with incredible, pride, knowing that this right here was accomplished in this climate.
Andre, any thoughts on that?
Simon Says is a beginning for me for sure. And with everything I have planned, I've got a lot of projects in my mind and a lot of plans to do things. And every time I do or write something, I'm always thinking about that and how it's going to influence our culture in comic books and in reading, as well as the larger world. I definitely think that Simon Says is one of my greatest projects, but I still have a lot more I want to tell with Simon. And every time I think about what we can do for the next chapter, I'm hoping that's going to elicit even stronger elicit a stronger response. And it definitely is something I'm very, very proud of.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I think at this point, we are taking questions from the audience members.
Oh, I thought that was questions from the audience. Wow. Man,
No,
okay.
Those were my special questions.
Okay, cool.
Let's see what I'm seeing down here. I don't see too much going on right now. I did have a question for both of you aimed specifically at your titles. So for Simon Says, it's, Simon Says is a gut-wrenching, riveting story about a man who lost around 80 family members during World War II and the Holocaust, obviously. So after World War II and Hitler's death, can you please tell us a little bit more about what your main character has been planning and why he might have planned those things without the giveaway and spoilers?
Yeah, so, first off, I want to say that Simon Says is inspired by the true story of Simon Wiesenthal, who was a Jewish artist who survived the war, but lost over 80 members of his family. He became one of the most prolific Nazi hunters. Our Simon Says is more of a composite of not only Simon Wiesenthal, but of all the different men and women who took it upon themselves following the war to hunt down Nazis. And where it really stems from is where the United Nations and the countries as a whole gave up. You know, after a certain point when Nazi hunting was no longer popular or no longer cool, people started to think about the whole, oh, we need to, you know, recover from this and not dwell on the past. That was really when Nazi hunters were spurred on to actually take it upon themselves. If the United Nations had actually done their job and continued that hunt, then maybe we would have seen a little less of the vigilante element and more of the, you know, nations taking it upon themselves to finish the job that they started in World War II. So I think that's one of the reasons that spurs our Simon on, is when it suddenly becomes up to him to complete the justice. You know, it was already something he was internalizing, and then at a certain point, there's a moment where he goes, I can't rely on anybody else. I've got to take it upon myself. And I think that's something that all of us as artists and writers and readers and human beings would respond to. I mean, if we lost family members, friends, or just even other people in our community to something so senseless as genocide, and then to watch the people who were supposed to be our saviors give up on us simply because they just didn't want to do it anymore. You know, if we had nowhere else to turn, it would be something we'd have to do. I mean, it's easy to sit here and read and say, oh, you know, I think I'm a little more enlightened. I wouldn't take vengeance. I wouldn't, you know, seek out somebody that way. I think I'm a little bit more passive. But if you really put the question to yourself after reading Simon Says, how would you respond to losing everything and then having no sense of justice come to terms? You know, you would take some real drastic measures. And so that is really the core of what drives Simon in everything he does.
Well, and thinking about the 80 family members, I mean, I don't even know if I have 80 family members. So the magnitude of that is completely beyond, I think, most of our comprehension, but it's key to understanding the book.
It's generational. I mean, it's also, you know, Europe at the times, you know, we're talking early 20th century Europe. You know, there wasn't a lot of expansion outside of your own town, out of your own home. I mean, even if you look at families back in early 20th century America, you know, there was big families, like 3 or 4 brothers and sisters. You'd have extended families. Your grandmother and your grandparents would live with you. Your great-grandparents might still be alive. You'd be producing kids like, you know, I mean, that's the whole drive of that time. So it might be hard for us to imagine losing 80 family members, but imagine losing your 7 close family members.
Right.
No one. I mean, what else would drive you in your world if you couldn't do the things that you love, you weren't with the people you love, you know, you have nothing else. And then you're watching these individuals, whether, you know, you believe them to be innocent or not, just escape, or even worse, get assimilated back into the current society.
Yeah.
You know, that would blow your mind. So, you know, I think it was just something that snaps in the character, and that's his driving focal point.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. There is a quick question in the audience that I'd like to take. What would you say to parents who argue that graphic novels or comics do not have enough meat to propel comprehension and vocabulary to the next level? My first answer as a professor of graphic novel literature is that actually when you study the literature and comprehension, vocabulary in graphic novels, it is higher than it is in traditional books.
Right. Well, shameless plug. I think if to check out Bitter Root, we have a character in our book that uses high vocabulary, and I've known adults that have to stop and go to refer to their thesaurus or dictionary just to find out what does this word means. We were intentional with that as well. We wanted to make people not. Again, we were thinking in terms of the broader scope of, we're just not trying to do a cool comic book. We're trying to do a book that has a lot of weight in a potentially academic side of things as well. Most of our, well, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of our requests for appearances are from universities because of what we're portraying from a historical standpoint. And then, just as a kind of an added bonus, it's our terminology in the book is very engaging to a lot of scholars. And of course, then the libraries, again, I've gotten a lot of great feedback from instructors, teachers in high schools that use our book as curriculum, part of their curriculum, which is really cool. We have essays in the back of each of our individual issues. We collected all those essays into our trade from scholars from all over the country, speaking on historical aspects, because we're referring to a lot of historical events and time periods during that time and even before that time, and even after that time, on some cases, and we expound on that by using these essays for people to engage in. So yeah, I mean, for us, we were very intentional to make sure that those questions that come up, we can have, we can say with confidence, we are very conscious of not making this just some bland, average, because again, there's so much out there. How do you stand out with all this incredible stories? And us being who we are, just being very honest, we're an all Black creative team in a industry that doesn't have a whole lot of that component. There's a lot of diversity out there, but it's spread out. But how do you, it's not too many that's concentrated like this. So we knew that we had this lightning in a bottle, if you will. And we know that we have to, use every tool in our toolbox to penetrate through so many different avenues.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of a quick catch-22 question, because Simon Says is my first really more mature novel that I've written. Most of the books I've written before have been more family-friendly, oriented. So not a lot of cursing, not a lot of violence, not a lot of violent content. And that catch-22 happens when you have some parents and teachers and librarians going, well, where's the meat? For me, it's not so much the vocabulary is the storytelling. Like, how much can you tell that still make the book available to high schoolers, without it being too over the top with certain elements in it. But to me, the catch of that is if you don't do that, you do water it down, then you're going to end up with a book that doesn't have any teeth. So I think it's something internally we had to decide. We're like, look, we're just going to do the book the way we feel it needs to be told, the way that it respectfully needs to be told. And if you're going to be a school that picks that book up, or you're going to be a parent that picks that book up for your kid, you have to be prepared that, whether it is something about the Holocaust or something focusing on, something, fictional or fictitious, it's up to you. You're going to put your kid in front of that, and they're going to they will either grow, or you'll have to explain some certain things to them. I mean, I had a 10-year-old kid pick up Simon Says and a signing last week, and I had to turn to mom and dad first and go, Mom and Dad, are you guys ready for your kid to be exposed to, all these different things that this book has to offer? And the parents were fine with it. But I've had other parents who've told me that even including the words hell or damn or anything like that is too much for their children. So you just have to pick a voice with it and go and suffer the repercussions, I guess, as a writer or an artist.
Well, and, from a scholarly perspective, post 9/11, which was really a transition into a much more visual reading age than ever before since the printing press, literacy scholarship will show you that when you're reading a graphic novel, you're reading on a visual, spatial level and a verbal linguistic level. So it's actually 2 times the amount of reading with 2 different intelligences put together. So, that's one thing I like to share with teachers. And also, we need to teach a modern literacy stage. Our communication styles have changed, and graphic novels are one of the best examples of that. It's got the print text that should stay in classrooms, and it has the visual text that should also stay in classrooms. So let me see. I think I have one more question. So somebody loved the idea of staying true to yourselves, and I got to back that one up. Thank you. And I think you both talked about that. And then the last question I have is, we all know, this is from YouTube, we all know winners write the question via YouTube. Okay.
I see it over here. So yeah, we all know.
Oh, wait, I read it wrong. Okay, sorry, it's in tiny script. Getting older. We all know winners write the history book. So congratulations to both of you. How do you see your work revising some of those stories?
Yeah, when it comes to writing historical fiction or writing something that has ownership and different level, if I was writing something totally fictitious, I could do whatever I want with it. But when you're writing something where there are 6 million people who have an ownership of it, or even more, and you have historians critiquing your work and other people looking at it, it's really a different level of responsibility and ownership. I do not seek to change the history as much as I seek to either elaborate on it or propel it in a different medium. So don't change it. Like I said, to answer the simple short question, what I really do is I really honor it. And I make sure that I do quite a bit of research beforehand. I have yet to come to a point of writing a novel or a story that I'm like, oh my gosh, the history book's got it wrong. I've got to revise this and fix it. And so really more so than anything, it is a matter of respectfully taking this ownership onto myself and making sure that as many parties who are going to be portrayed in it, all of them have a voice equally and all of them are respected properly.
What about you, Sanford?
I couldn't have said that any better. Just, in doing the research with Bitterroot, that time period and everything that predates it, it's very rich. The story, the history tells the story itself. Honestly, we're just kind of we're very fortunate to have an opportunity to tell a story that takes place during that time period. That's what motivated me. That was a big motivator as well. That time period is so rich within itself. The Harlem Renaissance. I mean, there's so many incredible minds that came through that time period, and it really you have to really be respectful of not only the time period but the people in that time period. So again, it's research within that, and so we were almost we were very careful to not go too far into some of those stories, because those stories they're so rich, they need their own space. We just wanted to occupy that time, that era, and highlight 1 or 2 major events. And in doing our research, we started thinking about, there was one particular event, don't want to necessarily give that away, that took place right before the Harlem Renaissance became a true movement, that had that event not had happened in our American history, I think the country would be in a totally different place right now, which is really propelling. When we did the research, we're like, wow, now that makes our story that much more meaningful. And we feel like you just alluded to, we feel that much more responsibility to make sure let's nurture that. Let's use that as our foundation to propel the story we're trying to tell. And of course, we've got scholars that kind of help guide us along as well. We did, we've had our conferences and discussions with many of those, and they felt like we really we're handling it in the best possible way, which, you know, for us, that's even more gratifying. But yeah, we definitely, you know, we understand the responsibility of telling this story and using history and keeping that balance.
And it's engaging. I mean, as soon as I saw Harlem, I was like, oh, I am so in on this book. But I think now it's time for us to end. And I want to thank the American Library Association. I want to thank both of our guests today, Andre and Sanford. And then I would also like to thank Image Comics, because I believe they published both of your texts, correct?
Yeah.
So that being said, the live streams continue tomorrow with Banned People and Post-Colonial Narratives. They also continue on the 25th with Banned Books and Civil Rights, the 26th with LGBT, you think I could say that of all people, LGBTQ challenges, which I am definitely going to that one too. And 9/27, access issues, privatization, and gatekeeping. So for more information, please stay in touch with the Graphic Novels and Comic Roundtable and Intellectual Freedom Roundtable from ALA. So thanks, everyone, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Celebrate banned books.
Thanks so much.
All right, take care.
Yes, thank you.